Sterling K. Brown.
Jess Cagle.
Nice to see you here today.
Good to see you as well, sir.
Okay, we're at the Critics Association event at the Beverly Hilton.
Yes.
Here in Beverly Hills. So a few minutes ago, you were in a room full of hard-boiled journalists, and you were doing a panel with your co-stars and Dan Fogelman from This Is Us.
Right.
And they showed a clip from the new season coming up, which starts in September 26th.
September 26th.
And this clip shows your character, Randall, having a conversation with his mother, Rebecca.
Correct.
Played by Mandy Moore.
That is also correct.
And the entire audience was reduced to tears. These hard-bitten journalists who are known for being a little hostile at this particular event.
Sure.
They were just reduced to tears. Tell me a little bit about that scene that the audience is going to be seeing.
So this is from 201. Okay, so first episode back, right? And Randall and Beth, if you remember from 118, the season finale, he's contemplating adoption. He wants to sort of fulfill his the legacy of his parents, Jack and Rebecca, honor William's memory by adopting. Beth doesn't quite see it exactly the same way that Randall does, right? So they're having a conversation, if you will, around this whole adoption issue. So he goes to seek some counsel, sage counsel, from the woman that he loves just as much as his wife. So he goes to see Rebecca. And she tells him that it wasn't automatic for her. When she first saw me as a baby, she had to be convinced by Jack. And Jack was just insistent, and he pushed. And sometimes there has to be that person in the marriage who pushes, who sort of guides the other person in the direction that they need to be. And she talks about how the stranger became her child, this child became her life, and that's me. That's Randall, right?
What else is in store for Randall in season 2 that you can talk about?
Oh boy, what can I talk about?
Or that you can't talk about, just feel free.
No problem. There's tons of spoilers that I can throw out. The adoption storyline is big. And the way that we go about it transforms from Randall's original perception of how he thinks it should be. So Beth and Randall come up with a compromise together for what works for them as a couple, similar to how Rebecca and Jack did, but it looks a little bit different. That's all I can really say without tripping up too much more. But the storylines are great because you have Kevin and his newfound career, or like resurgence of his film career, simultaneously trying to balance that with his relationship with Sophie. And trying to find balance as an actor right now, I can say, is one of the most challenging things about quote unquote success. Because you want to be able to give everyone the time that they deserve, professionally and personally. And so I got 2 kids at home, 6 and 2. I got a wife of 11 years who's also in this business as well. So I empathize with Kevin on the journey that he takes throughout season 2. Then you have Kate, who's looking to start a singing career. It's something that she and her mother sort of shared with one another. And she's got a beautiful voice. Chrissy Metz can sing.
Yes.
As can Mandy Moore. They can both sing. So they said, like, maybe we should have them sing in this show. And it's interesting, too, because the relationship between mothers and daughters, like mothers and sons, it's like, we're simpatico. But mothers and daughters can also often have a sort of frictionful relationship. So we'll see how this singing sort of brings up that tension between the two of them. And then in the past storyline, we pick up right the day after they sort of separate. Jack and Rebecca. So I think folks are going to be real. It's a full episode. Like, it feels like, I think it was like 54 pages when we first got it. It's a very full episode, and I don't know exactly how much they're going to condense it, but hopefully it'll be limited interruptions so that we can get back into the story in the most realized way possible.
Congratulations on the Emmy nomination. It's not Emmy season anymore unless Sterling K. Brown is nominated.
You just witnessed a black man blush. I appreciate that. It's a very subtle thing, but thank you.
Does it feel Obviously, you were nominated for the People vs. OJ last year and won.
I did.
Did it feel any different this time?
It did. It did feel different. It felt different because of the category, like Best Lead Actor in a Drama Series, and because of the history of it. You know, the last person nominated, African American, was Andre Braugher, and that was in 2001.
Yeah.
Last person to win was Andre Braugher, and that was in 1998. So when you think of it historically, it's like, wow, like this doesn't happen that often. You know, and it doesn't happen that both Milo and myself get recognized for the same show. I think that's the 8th time in history that there's been 2 actors from the same show. So historically, it's sort of like, wow, like this is really happening, you know?
Does it feel, given the importance, given the rarity of African Americans in that category, does it feel like more pressure? Does it feel like you don't want to let people down if you don't win?
No. You know what? I actually feel the opposite. I can remember the Oscars, early 2000s, where Whoopi Goldberg was the host. Halle Berry won for Best Actress. Denzel Washington won for Best Actor. And Sidney Poitier won like a Lifetime Achievement Award. And there had been sort of some backlash the year prior from the NAACP, you know, with the lack of nominations for African Americans. And I remember thinking that if I ever came to a moment in my career where I was getting this sort of recognition, the only thing that was important to me was that it was deserved. Like I didn't want any sort of recognition just because I'm black, right? Or because of anything outside of that. I hopefully am doing work that merits the recognition. And so I don't feel too much pressure. Not too many people have won Emmys. I am fortunate enough to have won one. So the fact that I get a chance to go back and I've been recognized just to be nominated, I'm all right, man. I'm all right. For real, for real.
I think you've got a good chance this year.
Yeah, and from your lips to the big guy's ears. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
I bet there's a lot of tension between you and Milo over this whole Emmy nomination thing.
Yeah, right. You can feel it's palpable.
Not speaking. Did you see Feud about Betty Davis and Joan
I
Crawford?
have not seen Feud yet.
Oh, you have to see Feud.
I know I do.
Betty Davis and Joan Crawford is you and Milo Ventimiglia. That's what I imagine it's like.
You have a very fruitful and rife imagination. Not even close.
Do you think, and I know that your answer to this will be based on anecdotal, experience with fans of the show, and maybe people that you know, but do you think that This Is Us has had any kind of impact on people raising a child of a different race of their own, specifically white parents raising black children?
I've had a couple people who have transracially adopted come up to me and say thank you. Like they'll see me in an unexpected place, whatever it is, and they'll just be like, we have a black child, and thank you. And we have asked the questions about suntan lotion and haircuts and what's proper about all these different things. Black hair is always a huge conversation if you have a daughter in particular. I think folks just enjoy seeing their story told in a way that's highlighted for a national audience. So, because oftentimes you feel like you're just doing this in isolation and people can't understand what you're going through. But then you see someone telling your story and you're like, they get it. And we had this woman, she's a young black woman who wrote a book about being a transracial adoptee. And she came and talked to our writers before we even started writing so that they could really get inside the ideas and the problems and just concerns that parents have with children of a different race. And I think that we're getting at least something right because the response has been overwhelmingly positive and just happy to see their story told.
When you hear those kinds of anecdotes, do you bring them back to the show?
I do. Like,
has it had an impact on different scenes or plot lines?
Possibly. Dan has like 4 seasons of this show sort of charted out in his head already.
Right.
But there's always wiggle room within the train tracks to explore different colors, right? There was an instance for me personally where somebody came up to me and it was about Justin and I. And they said, like, I hadn't talked to my brother in years. And I saw episode 115, Jack Pearson's son, where he leaves his play to come and find me at the office. And he's like, I called my brother just to tell him that I loved him and that I missed him. You know what I mean? Like those sorts of things, when you're in isolation, sometimes you're not necessarily aware of the impact that you're having on your audience. And then when they reflect the show back to you, like it's like, oh, it's not to sound like hyperbolic or whatnot, but it's more than a show. Like it is entertainment, right? But it cracks open people's hearts and makes you feel, demands that you feel something in the most wonderful way.
And then obviously People versus O.J. Simpson, which is when I think the world mostly took notice of you.
Sure.
I've always wondered why Christopher Darden did not want to talk to you about the show.
Man, you and me both. But actually I don't. It's kind of clear to me. After reading Darden's book and seeing just how much he cared about this case, watching interviews of him after the trial was over, and seeing just how devastated he was. And not only personally devastated with that investment, but he lost a great deal of time from his brother who was dying from AIDS, from his young daughter who was growing up in the Bay Area that he wasn't able to visit as much as possible. And it's clear to me, like, when you're in the presence of Marcia, she's moved on. Like, she's got other things going on in her life, and while it was still devastating, she's been able to make the past prologue. Whereas for Darden, he's still haunted. I think it's like almost post-traumatic stress. Besides any of the victims' families, he's the person most haunted by the trial, and I don't begrudge him not wanting to talk about it.
How did you feel when you watched O.J. get paroled?
I didn't. I don't spend that much time thinking about Orenthal James Simpson. Like, I wish him, live your life. He's 70 years old. I really don't think about it. Like when people were like, oh, you know he got parole? Great, good. I think, I'll say this, for the crime that he was tried for, he probably spent an inordinate amount of time in prison. And I don't know if that's right or not, but I think that's actually...
I think that's probably a safe assumption. Yeah. And it's also why people were so surprised and a lot of people had an emotional reaction to seeing him get paroled, whether that's rational or not.
Right. No, I was good. Good for him. There's a lot more going on in my life than worried about what's next for O.J. Simpson.
A couple of other things you've got coming up.
Yeah.
High profile. I'm going to start with Marshall.
Let's do it.
Which is a film coming out this fall.
Yes, sir.
About Thurgood Marshall, who was sort of almost, I mean, we see that we think of him as this, very staid, very important Supreme Court justice, when he was kind of a badass and a superhero.
No doubt.
Early in his career.
Absolutely.
You gentlemen are making a big mistake.
This here is Mr. Thurgood Marshall. Man is an attorney. You will treat him with the respect that he deserves.
And the movie is about a time before Brown versus Board of Education, which he argued in front of the Supreme Court before he was a justice. And he was a lawyer working with the NAACP.
Correct.
And he defended a young man named Joseph Spell.
You've done your homework, Jess Cagle. I like it.
But it's
Let's do it.
What's fascinating to me is that the movie, directed by Reginald Hudlin, focuses on that part of his life.
Right.
That one case, which was one of his least notable or least famous cases.
Sure. I didn't know anything about this case, which was tried, I believe, in 1941 in Connecticut. Joseph Spell is accused of the rape and attempted homicide of Eleanor Strubing, a white socialite played by Kate Hudson. And he's traveling the country looking to defend African Americans that he thinks are falsely accused. And he is the sole lawyer for the NAACP. And they're trying to look for a signature case to sort of hang their hat on to get larger exposure for the organization, greater funding, et cetera. So he finds this case, Joseph Spell, and this guy's got sort of a troubled, checkered past. He's not a cookie cutter dude. He's not the guy that you would put in the major leagues. He's not, Jackie Robinson or anything like that. Like, he doesn't look great, but he is adamant about his innocence. And Marshall decides to take on this case. The judge does not allow him to try the case because he hasn't passed the Connecticut bar. So he has to work through a Jewish lawyer by the name of Sam Friedman, played by Josh Gad. So basically you have a Cyrano de Bergerac situation in which Marshall is allowed to sit in the trial, but he cannot speak. So anything that he needs to put forward, he has to tell to Sam Friedman, who then presents it to the court.
What did you learn about Joseph Spell himself?
Man, a lot. He's from the South. He was in the Army. He was dishonorably discharged. He's married with children, but also has children from another woman. So he's not cookie cutter clean, right? But you don't have to be cookie cutter clean in order to be innocent. And I think that sort of resonates in today's society.
Were you able to talk to people that knew him?
He went missing. He was not heard from again after the trial. Yeah.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So I talked to some people who knew the Friedman family. So Sam Friedman, who tried the case. And the writers are actually sort of tangential family friends with them. But that's about as close as I got to anyone on the actual, characters.
Is there anything that they said about him that stuck with you?
Oh, they said that he wasn't like a warm, fuzzy guy, right?
That's perfect for you.
Yeah. I mean, because I'm just so cheery all the time. But actually, it was a welcome departure for me because I do feel as if oftentimes people say that, like, oh, you seem like such a good guy and it's so great to see you as Randall or whatnot. And I feel like for the most part, that is part of me. But I'm also a douchebag. And it's really nice to have an opportunity to do that as well. And not to say that Joseph Spell is a douchebag, but he is, he's a man. He's
definitely
a man.
complicated.
Definitely complicated, for sure.
How does it feel to be part of Black Panther?
It's a dream. As a matter of fact, like right after OJ was done, I had a meeting with Nate Moore. And I said, listen, I've been practicing my Wakandan. I know you already got like the titular characters taken care of, but how can I be down? Because, man, this is a black superhero. Like, it's huge. When I had first read the Black Panther comics, it was like early 2000s, and Reggie Hudlin had actually written a series.
Right, he's been involved with,
He's been involved for a while, right? And I was like, this is fascinating. And so I collected all these books, and friends would ask me, do you read comics? I'm like, not all into comics, but I read this Black Panther series. This was like 2006. A friend of mine was like, you should get the rights, dude. So when they do the movie, like, you can be a part of it. I was like, man, they ain't gonna do no black superhero movie. So 10 years later, it's happening. And to be on set and to see the level of production that is being put into this film and to see primarily a cast of African and African American descent in front of the camera, it's historical. It moves me, like it moves me to tears, right? And so just to have, I don't have a huge part, but I got a good part. I'm happy with my part.
What's it? It's Njobu.
Njobu. Njobu is a character from T'Challa's past. And that's all I can say without risking like losing life or limb. Let me tell you how deep it is. You go to the set and they give you sides for the day. You look at your sides for the day, and when you're done with the scene, you give your sides back. And if you forget them, like I did one time at the hotel, someone follows you back to the hotel and you give them those sides. They ain't playing. They are not playing.
This is very serious stuff
It's
here.
no joke. I get to take my kid to go see a black superhero movie, and he gets to see an image of himself as the man. And when I was a kid, I got a chance to see Christopher Reeves, I got a chance to see Michael Keaton, you know what I'm saying? But I didn't get a chance to see Chadwick Boseman. Chadwick Boseman looks like me. Like, he looks like my son. So I'm not only excited for that, but then Halloween, I can't wait to see little white kids dressing up as Black Panther, man. It's freaking dope. So yeah, I'm excited. I feel good.
You have 2 sons.
Yeah.
How do you think the world is different than when you were growing up? And how do you think the world is the same?
Well, I lived in St. Louis, Missouri, and now my kids are growing up in Los Angeles, so that's culturally very different. The Midwest is very conservative. And I can remember thinking at a time that I have gay people in my family who weren't able to openly discuss their homosexuality. I feel like that's shifted, especially here in the coast. Like, I have conversations with my son all the time. He asked me one time, he saw the cover, Caitlyn Jenner, very fair, my son saw it, and he goes, "Daddy, is that a man or a woman?" I said, "Good question." I said, "That is a woman who used to be a man." And he's like, "How's that work?" I was like, "I don't have all of the information, but like, she felt like she was a woman, but she was in a man's body, and now she gets to be a woman." And he goes, "Am I a woman?" I said, "I don't think so. I think you're a guy, right?" And he's like, and then it came into a conversation of homosexuality, and he was like, "Well, can I marry you?" I said, "That's very sweet. I appreciate that, buddy, but I'm already married to Mom, and I'm not gay. So it wouldn't work out between us. It's also a lot more complicated than you could possibly imagine." But we have those conversations.
Wow.
My mom didn't have those conversations with me, right? Like, it was a taboo sort of thing that just wasn't talked about, right? I do feel like, in terms of being African American and the way little black boys are scrutinized, I feel as if you don't get away with boys being boys the same way that you do when you're part of mainstream society. Like, the rate of suspension and expulsion for young black men is disproportionately higher than it is for their white counterparts. And as someone, and this is the first time I believe I've said this on camera, who was suspended in high school, right? It's, you're always told that somebody's watching. And that you have to be twice as good to get just as far. Haven't had that conversation with a 6-year-old just yet, but I am cognizant of the fact that people are watching, and you watch through a different prism than you watch young white boys. These are the conversations that transpire in the Brown household, if that helps to answer that question.
What was it like growing up for you with your parents? There was not a lot of money.
No.
And your father died when you were 10.
Correct.
But education was obviously very, very important to them and to your mom.
Man, Jess, Jess Cagle coming with the hits, man. Let's see.
I'll tell you why I asked the question.
Please.
Because you went to St. Louis Country Day School, which is a private school.
Yes.
By the way, you know who else went there?
Who?
Vincent Price.
I did know that
Yeah,
because of the
figured you did.
Vincent Price Theater that I acted in many a time.
I thought that was cool.
Yes,
you went
sir.
to the same school.
Yeah.
And also Stanford,
I did.
NYU. Like you have had great education. I always wondered that must have taken a lot of commitment on your part and on your mom's.
Yeah, so it's interesting. St. Louis Country Day was a single-sex school at the time that I was admitted. And my father did not want me to go. He didn't want me to be in an all-boys environment because of good old-fashioned Midwestern homophobia. He's like, I don't get it.
Thought it was going to turn you, did he?
Yeah. So he passed away, and my mother says, "It's you and me now, kid. And it's going this way. This is where you're going to school." But I went to this school, and I hated it in the beginning. I was not with my friends from my neighborhood. I resisted. I didn't know the dress code. I mean, it was a suit and tie school.
And it was mostly white.
It was mostly white,
Yeah.
very much white. And like, I had the only suit and tie stuff was the stuff that I wore to church. So I had like polyester suits and Stacey Adams and clip-on ties, and that was not the dress code. The dress code was polos and Sebagos that you stepped on the back of, and you wore shorts with long sleeve shirts, and it was incredibly preppy with Argyle socks up to here. And I was like, these white kids, what are they doing? Like, they look a hot mess, right? And then fast forward 3 years, and I too look a hot mess because like now I know the dress code, right? But it became this place that I think has probably shaped me more than any other institution that I've been in, because you have this wonderful opportunity with all boys, first of all, to not me be distracted from the wiles of femininity, et cetera, but you got a chance to just play, and it was a school full of nerds. And I mean that in that being a nerd was not a bad thing, because everybody was a nerd, right? Everybody did so many different things that you didn't have to deal with the stigma of being a theater geek or a jock or in student council. And there would be days in which I would go from football practice to play rehearsal. We did West Side Story, and I had half my football team playing like the Jets, in the play. And like my coach would be like, Brown, what are you doing to my football team? I said, I didn't do nothing. I asked them if they wanted to audition, and they said, yes, you can't blame me. And I don't think I would have become an actor if I didn't have the opportunity to go to St. Louis Country Day. My mom has a couple of different master's degrees. She went to a teacher's college in St. Louis, Missouri, because she wanted to be a doctor, but her father would not pay for her to go to medical school. So the best option at that time for a lot of black women was going to a teacher's college. But she knew that she wanted her children to be able to take their education as far as they could. So when I first went to Stanford, I was an economics major. I was big in the BC calculus, AP economics, et cetera. I worked at the Federal Reserve Bank. Stanford had the #1 econ program in the country, so that was my focus. But this little acting thing that I had done in high school sort of just kept rearing its head. And a professor came to my dorm who was going to be directing Joe Turner's Come and Gone, and asked if I wanted to be a part of the production. And I auditioned, and I got one of the lead roles. And he said, look, I know you're not gonna major in this, but just keep auditioning in the department. And the more time I spent on that stage, the more at home I felt. My grades got better and everything else that I was doing, because I was doing something that wasn't just pragmatic. I was doing something that fed my soul.
This next part, Sterling, is called the Kegel Exercise.
I'm doing them right now. Let's do it.
There you go.
Okay.
Let's fill in the blank. Strangers describe me as...
Oh, intense.
Close friends describe me as...
Loyal.
Only I know that I am...
Conflicted.
The movie I've seen the most times is...
Coming to America?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I start every day by doing...
About 50 push-ups.
50 push-ups. Well,
Yeah.
that explains everything.
Hey, there you go. I don't drink coffee, so like the endorphins sort of get me going.
As I'm falling asleep, I think about...
My lines,
It may be heresy, but blank is overrated.
Gone with the Wind.
Why do you say that?
My mom used to talk about it all the time, like it was this amazing thing. And I felt like when I watched it, it's one of those things like watching Casablanca. I love the filmmaking of it. It's the acting style is more heightened, right? And so when you hear something talked about as like the greatest of all time, and you see it, I'm like, oh, okay.
I think I'm really good at...
Ping pong.
I think I'm really bad at...
Golf.
I feel sexiest when I'm...
Lotioning.
Oh. I wouldn't be caught dead in a...
Moo-moo? Something like that. Yeah. Yeah, I can pretty much wear anything. No, anything. I'll wear anything.
There's no need for you to wear a muumuu.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
The best advice I ever received is,
be careful how you use your time. That's the one thing that you can't get back.
my greatest extravagance is,
Sunglasses. I like sunglasses.
the thing about myself I've learned to love is,
I'm handsome. And I didn't grow up feeling very handsome. I grew up feeling unattractive. And it took a long time to grow into a place where I was comfortable with me.
I could talk about blank for hours on end.
Game of Thrones.
I can sum up my life in this bumper sticker.
Always have an attitude of gratitude.
Thanks, Sterling K. Brown.
You got it, brother.
Congratulations again.
Thank you very much.
I can't wait for the second season of that show.
Dude, I just did so many Kegels, it's not even funny.